Hey, greetings and welcome back. I haven't been posting videos as frequently lately, and it's because I've kind of gotten stuck in some bigger projects that are going well, but that I'm having difficulty getting across the finish line. So what I want to do today is I want to do something a little bit different for me. I want to do something a little bit more extemporaneous that requires less writing from me in advance, but still addresses an issue that I think is compelling and interesting and worth discussing. So we've had this question from the beginning of photography of whether or not photography is an art. And a lot of times this might feel like kind of an uninteresting question, but the thing is, it's really persistent, right? It's never been resolved once and for all. And there's a tension there, and it suggests that even though we have a lot of different answers at this historical point, none of them have really gained widespread, maybe cultural acceptance. There are still today plenty of people who want to argue one side or the other. The issue is also treated in kind of a flat way in many cases. Like, this is well-traveled territory in YouTube, and we all have seen a bunch of different videos where a photographer will go to Wikipedia or the dictionary to make a checklist of what counts as art and to see if photography checks the boxes. So we're not going to do that in this video or subsequent videos on the topic. I want to explore the different areas of the question. I think a good question has value in its own right, and rather than just being invested in getting to a fast answer, I think we should take the question seriously and probe in the different areas where it leads us. So I just want to give a couple of examples today of work that I think puts pressure on the question of whether or not photography is art. And I think, some of these works I'm going to talk about do make a specific claim in their execution about photography as art and the relationship between photography and art. So my first example is a section of work done by the artist Richard Prince, who did what was called appropriation art and or re-photography. And he did it a couple different ways. He did it with, I think most famously, with ads for Marlboro cigarettes from print advertisements. He did it with reader-submitted photographs in biker magazines from, I think, the 70s or the 80s. And then he also did it with Instagram photos. And I guess the first thing that stands out about Prince's work is the high dollar amount that it fetches in the market. Just this month, one of his so-called Untitled Cowboy pictures from the Marlboro series sold at the evening auction for Sotheby's for $1.1 million. So this means this work is still considered vital and relevant and important in the art world. But the other thing that's really noteworthy about the work is that I think that Prince is operating in really bad faith when he makes this work. He has said in interviews that when he was doing the Marlboro cigarette pictures that he didn't know that much about copyright law. He was just had an idea and was pursuing it. And that's not really credible. I mean, we all learn in school that we can't claim other people's work as our own, right? Plagiarism is a well-known concept. It's part of cultural literacy. But I think that for Prince, his denial of awareness of this aspect of the law is serving a particular function, because I think this work is making a particular claim. What he's claiming is that at least these photos, and maybe photography in general, can't be art. It is merely cultural detritus, and that it becomes art when it's acted upon by an artist who then transforms it and elevates it into something else, something new. So he has to deny the importance of the original photographer's contribution to the work, because he's claiming for himself the sole ability to make it artwork. But there's a problem with this claim, especially in the Marlboro ads. And I want to read what the critic Hal Foster said about it in his essay, The Return of the Real. He's talking about different forms of realism, and he says, in appropriation art, the real is presented as constructed in representation. Thus, for instance, the Marlboro images of Prince picture the reality of the North American nature through the myth of the cowboy West. So here's the thing. Is that myth present as such in the originals? Or does it take Prince rephotographing it to recontextualize the image enough to be critical of the use of this myth? And I think actually the original cigarette ads that just say Marlboro and have the cowboy doing something dramatic or in a dramatic landscape, I think those are every bit as good at showing the construction of reality. It's that juxtaposition of the print, just the word of the brand against the image, because it's telling us the whole reason that image is there is to present a dramatic and compelling representation of rugged individual masculinity that the cigarette brand finds attractive for the sake of selling cigarettes. I don't think Prince does it any better than or calls any more attention to it than the original advertisements do. So I think that's pretty problematic. But at least, but just to review then, the claim here is that the original photograph can't be art, isn't art, that it takes an artist to work their alchemy, to do criticism, to transform it into something different, into art. But really, the presence of that mythology, the obviously constructed nature of that mythology is probably why Prince selected those images in the first place. So as much as I respect someone like Hal Foster, I don't know that kind of thinking really ages very well in relationship to this work. The next example I want to give you is actually my favorite of the three examples I'm going to give you today. And this is a series of photographs made by the photographer Gjon Mili in the year 1949. And they feature Pablo Picasso, obviously, the most famous artist in the world at the time, doing light drawings on long exposure photographs. And let's ask the question, where's the art here? Is the art Picasso's gesture in space? Is the art the portrait of Picasso, that it's sort of an embedded feature of these photographs? Pardon me. Or is the art the drawing that we see in the image? And what's interesting about this is that there's no other way to make these images than in long exposure photographs. If you don't have the long exposure photograph, then all you have is a shirtless Picasso gesturing in the dark, which, in some contexts might be art, but I don't think it is in these. So I really think that whether they say it out loud or not, they are absolutely dependent on the uniqueness of the long exposure photograph to create these drawings. There's no other way to do it. And, if someone gives you a drawing, like a pen and paper drawing, you have no doubt that that's let's say it's by Picasso, you have no doubt that that's a work of art, right? So these photographs kind of have to be the work of art themselves. And certainly, in the art market, they function as such. They fetch over $10,000 a piece when they come up for sale. I should note, though, that in the first two examples, both the Prince and the Picasso, or the Mili, you have a famous artist there. And, I don't think there's any doubt that the fame of the artist involved in these projects has a lot to do with them being considered high-value art objects. If I were to do either of these, I doubt that they would be worth much of anything. And in some ways, even the Richard Prince stuff does seem like a little bit like an undergrad stunt, right? And you wonder if some undergrad hadn't, tried this in an art course at some point. Regardless, I think that, just to summarize then, that the claim in the Mili and Picasso photos has to be that the photo itself, which is a completely unique way of creating a drawing, has to be the art object. So now the third example I want to give you, I'm less sure of, and I'm not sure what claim it's making, but I think it's worth talking about. And it has to do with the artist Andy Goldsworthy. Now, Andy Goldsworthy is an environmental artist, and a lot of his work is temporary. It might last a few hours, a few minutes, a few days. But we would not know of his work if he didn't produce these really nice picture books of it. And really, these books are the way he became a known photographer. Then, of course, later on, there were the films. But photography plays a huge role in his career as an artist. And obviously these books, have a powerful documentary component to them, right? They're showing him making the work. They're talking about how he thinks about the work. They're photographing the work itself. And while I understand that documentary photography doesn't have to be strictly objective, it can have a strong point of view, I do start to wonder about images like this one here. I want to get into this a little bit. Like, look at this image. You have the motion blur of the water in the stream. You have the intensity of the yellow color of the leaves that have been stuck onto bark with water. You have the tight framing and the very specific point of view, an angle of the shot that makes it look like these stripes of yellow are hovering or floating above the bed of the stream. So this image really takes us out of the basic physics of everyday life. It exists sometime, in a different time, in a different physical reality, in a way that wouldn't be the case if we could have been there the day that Goldsworthy made the work. If we'd been walking up and down the stream, we would have seen it from multiple different angles. We would see how the strips of bark are supported. We would see it in the broader context. So I think the way this image pulls us out of the physics of time and space and gravity. And it has such a particular point of view and gives us such a strong impression of the work. I wonder if this is more than just a documentary photograph. I wonder if it's certainly finishing the work of art, right? Because we'll never see it any other way than this. But does it become part of the work itself? Or does it become something like a second work based on the first work? I'm not really sure, but I think the strength of the point of view and the strength of the impression suggests to me that it might not be simply a documentary photograph. But this would be something that, I'd love to hear what people have to say about it. And really, I'm kind of shopping for your insights and your thoughts about this whole thing. I don't want to address this issue of whether photography is art in a linear way, right? So here I was just looking at specific works. In other videos, I think I'm going to look at how people have written about this topic in the past, such as someone like John Berger, who found himself on both sides of the argument of whether or not photography is art. Anyway, that's what I've got for you today. Please leave your comments below. Tell me what you think about these examples and the question itself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.